So I still want to see more of Anthem in 2020, despite how strange that might sound. I had a ton of fun in this game when it worked, and even better, it hits the nail in the head when it comes to certain features that I do love about video games nowadays. It's online, it's an RPG, it definitely makes you feel very powerful with all of the characters, but even better, it gives you unparalleled freedom of movement, which not that many games do nowadays. So that is why I really hope that the rumors about Anthem 2.0 or Anthem Next are true, because I want to see Bioware really bringing this game up and making it into what the fans really deserve. And if the past few months have proven to me anything, it's the fact that Bioware is still interested in actually improving upon the game and support it with continuous updates. That is why in this video I also want to bring you guys 10 ways in which I believe Bioware can massively improve upon Anthem in 2020. So as always, if you enjoyed this video, a thumbs up on it would be super appreciated, and let's get started. Before jumping in though, I want to give a huge shout out to Instant Gaming once more for sponsoring today's video. I've been partnered with them for more than 6 months now, and they have some of the best discounts for video games I've seen around. They also help me set up giveaways for you guys every month, so if you also enjoy cheap and free games, then make sure you check them out by following the links down below. Let's start with the endgame, since this is the most important part of any online RPG and something that Anthem still lacks to this day. As a matter of fact, Anthem's endgame consists of only 4 strongholds, 3 of which were implemented since day 1 and the 4th one was added like 4 months later down the line. This is why I fully believe that a game like Anthem would greatly benefit from having raids. And not just any raids, there are a few specific things that Bioware could do to properly implement this. First of all, a raid, in order to qualify as such, must separate itself from any other type of content in the game. What this means is that a raid should have its own theme, both in terms of aesthetics, artwork, and even better, in terms of enemies. Enemies should be unique to the raid, should be found only in that encounter, and they should definitely be more powerful than anything else in the game, have their own unique attacks and own abilities. A raid should also have bosses, as in multiple of just one, which is the current case for Anthem, and all of these bosses should have their own unique areas with their unique mechanics and truly be challenging to give players the feeling of satisfaction when overcoming them, because that is what keeps player going. Now combine all of this with the fact that the game desperately needs a dedicated loot drop system. This is the exact opposite of what we currently have in the game, and it's something that I'm going to talk about more when I'm going to go over the loot overhaul that I am expecting, but otherwise dedicated loot drops need to exist for a raid to truly feel both challenging as well as rewarding, so that you know when you fight against a certain type of enemy or a certain type of boss, you will get or have a chance to get a certain type of loot. The loot system is the next area which Bioware could massively improve upon. Even though it has been improved over the months, you can pretty much fully gear all of your characters with legendary loot nowadays. The core issue was never resolved, and that was the fact that players had no control over what loot they would be getting, and even more so over the stats they would apply to the characters. So the only thing that Bioware did with making the legendary so common is that they literally removed a layer of loot and replaced it with a different one. So instead of going like full orange with masterworks, you're going in full yellow with legendaries, which truly lost their values, but you still have zero control over the types of builds you can create, over the stats that you get, and even more so, you cannot really test anything in this game, since you cannot reliably buff a certain type of stat or a certain type of ability. So on top of having dedicated loot drops for raids, I would also love for Bioware to implement a way for gear to have permanent stats, something that is not RNG dependent, and on top of that also add set bonuses that give you certain types of abilities, new mechanics, or new buffs to a certain type of item. That would definitely make loot feel so much better and more rewarding, and also like give players more control as well as reason to go in and hunt for it. Moving on to number 3, let me give you a small piece of Anthem history before the game was actually released, and this involves of course Fort Tarsis. Back before the game released, Bioware came in with an announcement for Fort Tarsis, of it being the player hub in this game, except that unlike other player hubs, this would be single player, as in only you had access to your own version of the fort. Their reasoning back then was pretty simple, and it, well, kind of made sense, as in the story was your own story, you could follow and choose your path, and you would have your own version of the fort. Of course, we later found out that that was complete BS, and most probably the reason behind this was a logistic one, as in they literally literally did not have enough time to actually properly implement a player hub. So I think that this should probably be addressed in whatever future update they have, as in completely scrap the fort and rebuild it kinda like how it is in Destiny. A proper multiplayer player hub, have all of the players join over there in the same session or well on the same types of servers, have a lot of NPCs, a lot of vendors, and finally see your character in third person, but even better, move at the proper speed. Even if flying is not around, players should be able to move at the very least how they move in free play. Since we are on the same page, the same should be done about the end expedition screen, and as a matter of fact, both of these points with Fort Tarsis and the end expedition screen is something that Jason Schreier showed in its, of course, rumor about the redesign of Anthem. So hopefully this is going to be the case. I never understood why a game like Anthem needs an end expedition screen. It kind of feels like a proper mobile game. So this should be done with, and once you're done with an expedition, you should be able to choose what you're doing next. Remain in the dungeon, leave it, because you have the keys to do that. I believe this brings us to number 5, and have you ever found it strange that an RPG in this day and age completely lacks a perk system? Well, Anthem used to have a perk system back in its alpha days. I played around with it and it was actually quite decent up until, you know, Bioware came in, decided to scrap it and put all of those perks on gear so that everything feels even more RNG than before. But I think that it is finally time to actually rethink this idea, and I know that the general consensus is that, well, you have a pilot that actually drives the javelin, so that whatever perk system there is, it would be human specific and not javelin specific, and to that I would say that you're wrong, because there's no reason to not implement that. Just have every type of javelin with its own perk system, and when you equip that javelin, have all of those points to invest into them and have your loadouts saved when you equip that javelin. Just like how it is with the gear, with the weapons that you can share between them and everything else that exists out there. So no reason to not have javelin specific perk systems that augment their already existing powers. This could be a mix of passive abilities that straight up increase certain stats, certain chances or probabilities to deal more damage. They could also add active perks that change the way some of your active abilities function. For example, let's just say you play with a storm and your lightning bolt does more than lightning damage, or well, does something more than just debuff enemies with lightning. Let's just say it also stuns them, or maybe also set them on fire or something along these lines. There's definitely a lot of possibilities that would work in the universe of Anthem. Moving on to 6, UI Redesign, something that I am aching for ever since the alpha days, and I truly believe that the UI in Anthem is the ugliest UI I've seen so far. It's kind of like something somebody would create in order to overcompensate for something they are lacking. So they need to redesign this, make way more simplistic, not have all of those oblique lines which make no sense and take too much space on the screen. Destiny 2's UI comes into mind. It's simplistic, it's fast, it's snappy, but also it looks quite majestic. So I really hope there's something gonna be done about the UI, because right now it really makes no sense and it's kind of like the core issue of the game. It's slow, sluggish, menus take a long time to actually load, so they really need to completely revamp that and build from the ground up. Number 7, redesigned monthly challenges. This is something that hasn't changed since day one, and as a matter of fact, they still reward you embers. Embers are useless for about 6 months at this point, since you can easily get legendaries. Probably most of you already have like 1,000,000 embers to play around with, and they still kind of sit in your inventory doing nothing. So these need to be rechanged, just like how it is with the weekly and the daily challenges. That definitely makes sense. So they should be made more rewarding and give you like some of those currencies to get more legendaries, but you know, appropriate number for a month worth of content. That would be awesome. The same could be said about the shop in Fort Tarsis that still sells embers, very overpriced embers, and it doesn't really make any sense. Again, maybe make it into something that can be useful to gearing up. Maybe give us schematics in order to craft items, legendary items with, you know, like predefined stats. Maybe even let us sell our current embers to that shop, since again, most of us have hoarded tons and tons of embers of any kind in our inventories, to the point that I think we can pretty much craft a whole civilization out of all of the embers that we currently have in our inventories. Number 9, I cannot believe I have to say this, and I was supposed to say this in the previous video that I made, but the game still lacks a text chat to this day, and I believe that Bioware's reasoning of having some, certain laws that prevented them to add a proper text chat in the game, that I never bought it. Most probably they never had the time to fully implement it, and well, especially since other games came out during Anthem's development, after Anthem came out, during when Anthem got released, and they all had text chat into them. So I think to this point Bioware needs to add a text chat ASAP. It's one of those pressing issues that need to be addressed, because the communication in this game is extremely hard. You have to fully cooperate with your teammates in order to solve some of the puzzles in the game, some of the challenges, and even better, to get that high score. So it's not going to suffice to ask players to use the text-to-speech, which again works like 10% of the time at best, and even more so to use headsets, since not all players afford headsets, have headsets, and even more so, even if they do, not all of them have proper working headsets. So a text chat needs to exist in an online game, be it an RPG or whatever there is, and there's no reason to not have it in Anthem in 2020. This brings me to the final awesome change Bioware could do in order to massively improve Anthem, and that is to at least redesign the open world. And maybe I'm not the only one who thinks this, but I find the world of Anthem to be quite forgettable. There's not a single point of interest or location that I find memorable in this game, well, maybe with the exception of the huge tree in the middle of the actual map, but I don't think I can name anything else. There's no name that I can name for Anthem, and I think that that applies to like 99.9% of the Anthem players. So what they should do instead is maybe even shrink the world a little bit, if that means they would add more points of interest, add more environments, not just like jungle environments. I already love the way the game looks, I'm not saying that, the game looks gorgeous, but maybe add something like a volcanic area with lava in it, maybe a mountain peak or a mountain range with severe storms and a lot of, well, like just how it is in the current ice tide, a lot of ice and snow. That would be really awesome. Add a desert area. It makes no sense to not have something like that, and take advantage of all of the mechanics that could work in this case. And while you're at it, maybe at least add one more city on top of Fort Tarsis. There was mentions of another city in the lore, so hopefully that is going to be added with Anthem 2 eventually. But that is pretty much it with my current list of things that I believe would massively improve Anthem. Now let me know down below what are the other things that you might want to see added in the game. Do you agree with my list, or do you want to see something else added on it? Let me know down below, and in the meantime also don't forget to subscribe to the channel, activate that notification bell since YouTube algorithm loves that so much, and I will see you guys next time.